Ribbon Headphones. The folks at Sineaptic sent over the SE-1 headphones for me to take on a test drive, share some thoughts. These are pre-release cans. I'm really excited to give these a listen because this is a different kind of headphone technology. Sineaptic is using a dual ribbon diaphragm to drive these cans. I've never listened to music on a ribbon headphone before. That's a little exotic. But even though this is some exotic tech, Sineaptic's first headphone is not aiming for a luxury boutique audience. This is attempting to be a more consumer accessible product with some lifestyle convenience to boot. It's also a Bluetooth headphone, and the pre-order price positions this as a premium headphone, but not an exotically expensive headphone for the exotic technology used. These cans are pretty big, kind of like some electrostatic headphones or planar magnetics. Whenever we use different arrangements for magnets and membranes, we can often need a bit more space. That extra space and material can sometimes be a little heavier. So I think Sineaptic is doing a good job of balancing that in this headphone design, so it still rests comfortably on your head. Some of the material choices, there are fewer moving parts. There aren't any telescoping bits on the arms or for the ear cups. There's just sort of swivel and positioning there. But instead of those pieces, there are some handy skull pads that act as shock absorbers to keep the weight off your head. Otherwise, everything else was chosen to be lightweight and comfortable. None of it feels cheap, but some parts and pieces were definitely chosen for lower cost and lower weight. We've got Bluetooth built in, AAC is the main high quality codec, and there is a 3.5mm jack for cabled playback. The Bluetooth connection is good. I think that helps with the idea of consumer convenience, but these are open ear headphones. Ribbon drivers are bidirectional. That means you'll be able to hear almost everything around you, and others will be able to hear what you're listening to if they're sitting relatively close to you. Wireless is convenient, but these certainly shouldn't be considered good travel cans. They don't fold up. I would worry about ribbon durability when you're really knocking them around or you're shoving them into a suitcase or a backpack. I look at this more as a handy way to listen around the house, and you don't always have to be tethered to a DAC or an amp. I kind of mostly listened to these connected to some of my favorite little portable DACs and amps over the 3.5mm cable. Before we get too much further into the technology of these things, I do want to highlight the packaging. Sineaptic packaged this in a surprisingly large box. And you might be thinking that this box is kind of overkill for a pair of headphones, just even a larger pair of headphones, especially when you compare that against the hard travel case that is also included for the same price. But I do want to highlight for ribbon drivers that I would worry would maybe be just a little bit more fragile than dynamic driver headphones. They had these little grommets and elastic cables in the box so that the hard case would float in the box. And this was really appreciated because the shipping box, the outer box that this was shipped in, was totally demolished when this review unit arrived on my front porch. There's a ton of impact and crumple damage all along the Sineaptic's box, and the outer box was just completely savaged. But everything inside, floating, suspended, totally safe, and these headphones arrived completely unscathed. Again, considering the price on these things, I just want to throw out that kudos, that was very well considered. Back to the cans on my pre-release unit here, the headphone needs to have its own built-in amp to drive these ribbons. The Bluetooth mode is good, but there is just a bit of that air that clicks on when you go wireless and the audio signal is activated. It's not a bad or a distracting hiss, but you do hear that amp turn on. I have to imagine ribbons are thirsty, a little trickier to drive than dynamic headphones. Now, I try to listen at lower and safer volumes, and what I consider a comfortable listening volume is just a couple clicks shy of the SE-1's maximum output on their own. Playing with these pre-release, and I'm not sure if this is something that can be addressed with a firmware update, but it's that wireless side. I think that's kind of the clumsy thing in operation. There's no on or off. There's a Bluetooth mode and an auxiliary mode, And I accidentally let the battery die out a couple times because of how that Bluetooth mode connects, and where I thought I was plugged in with a cable, but it was still using the amp to drain the batteries built in. I think it would be better if there was just a clear way to turn them completely off. Thankfully, they can be used while charging. Just plug in the USB-C and wired or wireless. So if you make the same goof I did, you don't have to wait for the battery to top off before you can keep listening. So yeah, we're in good shape. All that's well and good. The tech stuff, it makes sense considering the target audience and the reasonable price point, but these are headphones. And the most important question is, how do they sound? These things are really crisp. I'm using this word, ribbon. Now, I'm familiar with ribbons in microphones. Now, ribbon mics have a reputation for being really silky smooth and mellow and warm. We've got 2 ribbon drivers per ear. I was surprised to hear maybe the most articulate sound I've ever heard near this price. A critically sharp and detailed sound, razor wire articulation, and a clarity that competes very well against the planar magnetics I've heard in slightly higher price tiers. On top of that, there's a lovely rumble to the low end, but with plenty of room for the mids to deliver that clarity and detail. Everything I'm gonna say about them, you have to filter through my personal preference for more mids and more detail, more articulation. I love headphones that deliver a critical listening experience where you can hear the little nuances and tremor and vibration around vocals or guitar distortion. I joke, but I really do want to hear the ridges of someone's fingerprint raking over a guitar string. Some people are going to find that kind of clarity fatiguing, but I've spent 2 decades recording human speech, and I'm at my happiest when I know I'm getting all the little vibrations that I can. The tuning, the EQ shape of the SE-1 is a little smiley face, but in a very pleasant and consumer-pleasing way, and it's totally in keeping with that more consumer-grade focus. People want some rumble, they also like some sparkle, but someone like me, my precious mids are not getting stepped on to deliver that fat bass. There's just so much room for activities, both in the frequency response, but also just in the soundstage. It's so open. It's a wide open sound. A really good stereo mix sounds spacious and vibrant, and when a good mix positions instruments in space around the listener, these cans do a lovely job of reproducing that, like very well-tuned audiophile grade speakers. No tricks, no gimmicks, no spatial audio software, just good old-fashioned open-ear drivers combined with some novel audio tech. I wrote out a stream of my notes during my very first listen on these cans. I published those unfiltered notes over on my Patreon, but spending some more time with them, there's almost no weakness here. This is just a brutally competitive sound at the price. The bass is rich, it's lush, it's colorful, but it has that elastic quality to it, a springy tension to the attack on low frequency instruments. And I'm repeating myself here, but there's so much room. So that low end is just, it's like a shelf. That rumble just sustains, but it stays out of the way of the low mids. Now, there's nothing sloppy or dull happening in that bass and sub-bass space. It doesn't change or misrepresent the tone of an older recording. Like, it's not finding bass head rumble in a Prince track, right? You've got that 80s mastering, it's maintained, but the bass guitar and kick drum just have their own place to live. And when the lead guitar comes snarling in, you get all the delicious edge and rasp. And then Prince's vocals just clear all that music and they live in their own specific place. I've said things like this before, especially when I first started listening to planar magnetics. At a certain price, it's kind of like you peeled plastic wrap off of a lens. Compared against other $200 cans, this is a little like peeling plastic wrap off and seeing your music just a little more clearly than you could before. It's so tasty on electronica and hip hop. The thump has a tight, controlled punch to it, and often those producers are having the most fun placing samples and instruments out around you in the mix. But similarly, I really like this vibe for jazz. I feel the low end might overly color some of your favorite older recordings, but vibrato and tremor on strings is super tasty. And reeds, like saxophones and clarinets, I love that timbre. If you're connected to a DAC or an EQ, you ever so slightly roll off just a touch of that sub bass and letting the rest of the headphone just do its thing, it's a really nice sound. You get really pretty colors. And it's that kind of sound where you really have fun just going back over your favorite songs and listening to how the headphones handle them. I'm becoming kind of a junkie for the novelty of new headphones, and especially when a headphone can deliver this kind of clarity, that's where I'm having a lot of fun. Now, especially for the driver style, I really like what they do with rock and distortion. I've prattled on about this before, I'm repeating myself here, but you can take a track from Tool or Rage Against the Machine. Those mixes can be surprisingly fragile. We think of them as big, heavy rock and roll, but if you just slather on too much low, or you hit them too hard with like a deep V kind of tuning, they can get really messy real fast. All the aggression, all the buzz, all that energy comes screaming forward. I get goosebumps letting these things just kind of tickle my ears. And being a movie buff, a film buff, good cans are so satisfying for good sound design. Not as any grand example of movie audio, but I was watching Clear and Present Danger, and there are a couple scenes with Willem Dafoe and Harrison Ford doing the whispering, intense acting voices. And that tremor in the voice, it just sounds real pretty on headphones like these. Nah, I should probably put them on just so you can kind of see what they look like when you're wearing them. They do wear kind of a little tall, but I do like those skull pads. The shock absorbers do their trick in keeping weight off your head. In all my listening, the few concerns I have, this kind of detail can sometimes be fatiguing for folks who prefer a more mellow tone to their audio reproduction. For me, this was mostly an issue on older recordings where instruments are hard panned left or right channel. Like some of those old Beatles albums where all the guitars are on one ear. That kind of burns me out in general, but I felt like these, being so articulate, it tired me out faster than usual. I was constantly searching for older mono recordings instead of those early stereo recordings. Also, not common, every now and then, you might run into a really close-mic'd recording that exaggerates the sibilance. And then these cans can get a little piercing. Specifically in my playlist, I have a playlist on Qobuz that I use to test all of my headphones. You can check it out, it's linked down below. Lord, Stoned at the Nail Salon, is mic'd almost ASMR style, and the ends of phrases just sizzle, and it's really unpleasant on the SE-1. Now, I didn't encounter many other tracks that produced that exact kind of sizzle. This was not a common complaint. Other female vocalists and singer-songwriter tracks were produced beautifully. Even a more intimately recorded Adele track usually avoids that kind of close lips on the microphone sibilance. So I would consider this concern very infrequent. I'm really impressed. This is a fun, unique, and vibrant sound. And delivering a clarity I would usually pay more to get in a cabled-only headphone. This claim that somehow these dual ribbons are gonna do something a little bit different to your music, to your audio, that claim is beautifully realized in this product. I would be perfectly sated plugging these in and only using them over a cable, but they also include the ability to go wireless for those times you might want to. So Sineaptic SE-1, very well done. I really like what I'm hearing. Even if the headband can make you look a little like a Cyberman, I don't look at myself while I'm listening to really good music. So I will, of course, leave some links down below where you can find more information on the Sineaptic SE-1 as they're getting ready to actually start shipping this product. I was so stoked to get to play with them before other people really had a chance to dig into them. My ears were really happy in these cans. So, as always, folks, thanks so much for watching, sharing these videos, subscribing to the channel, all the support lately. Absolutely fantastic. I can't thank you enough. Those who are checking out my home site, SomeGadgetGuy.com, hitting all the links in the description down below, or if you're joining the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon, that's patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list is basically the coolest collection of tech pals in the universe and some really fun geeks to nerd out on high quality audio. They're basically the coolest people in the universe, so I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet. I basically post as Some Gadget Guy everywhere online, but these days I'm spending most of my time on the Mastodons, so try to catch me over there, and I will catch you all on the next video.